Hello, photo fanatics. I'm Hayley from Creative Photo Folk, and today we'll be combining milk, oil, and paint to capture crazy colorful abstracts. Now, I watched many tutorials before attempting this project, which made this technique look pretty easy, but I actually found it took a lot of experimenting to get results I was happy with. So, in this video, you will learn what to do, as well as what not to do to get results you like. For this project, you will need some paint. I used liquid acrylic, mainly because I already had them on hand, and the bottle's made for easy pouring. But normal acrylic paint is fine. If you don't have that option, you'll need to mix some acrylic paint with some water in a cup and then use an eyedropper or pipette to drop that into your milk. Various pots to put your different colors into. A bowl to pour your used contents into so you can reset and change up your shots. Milk, ideally with a high fat content for better reactions. Oil. Any type is fine, although the clearer in color the better. You'll need enough to cover the top of your milk in the main container. A shallow dish or small bowl. Now this can be done handheld, but you'll have a better time using a tripod with a boom arm to position your camera overhead. A table. This needs to be low enough to put your tripod over so you can easily see the results on your camera screen, but high enough so you're not hurting your back while shooting. Mine was a bit too low and my back ached for several hours afterwards. So just something to be aware of. A macro lens is a necessity for this one. I tried with both a wide angle and a telephoto zoomed in, but as the balls of paint are so small, the need for a macro lens was unavoidable. When choosing your colors, think about whether you want a colorful or muted palette. I was kind of going for an 80s party vibe, but don't get too attached to your colors because they will run together and be a bit hard to control. You won't need any yellow because the oil will already have this hue. So to begin, pop your bowl on the table and pour in about an inch of milk. Now I initially tried shooting handheld because I like the freedom to vary my shots. But because macro lenses can be finicky when it comes to focusing, especially for a flat subject with not a lot of contrast, I found that I really did need to use a tripod for an easier time. When I did want to vary my setup, I would just spin the bowl to find different patterns. Shooting handheld does allow you to get in close and capture more details. But I found that the distance created by having my camera on a tripod actually allowed me to capture a better depth of focus. So I do recommend trying to get your camera a fair bit away from your scene as much as you can without having to crop out the edges. Now, once you have your camera on a tripod, to find focus, you can pour enough oil into the bowl to cover the surface of the milk, and this will give you some contrast to focus on. So you can lock in your focus using either manual or back button focus, making sure that it doesn't change every time you press your shutter. If your lens struggles to find focus, place a toothpick across the milk to focus on. And I do recommend refocusing fairly often just to make sure your tripod hasn't moved. I also added a dash of light using a speed light attached to its feet with a trigger and shot this across the top of the milk for a dash of extra light. Unfortunately, you cannot shine light directly over the bowl as you'll see the reflections on the surface. So the settings I mainly used were a shutter speed of 1/160th of a second, which is a bit slower than I usually like, but because my camera was on a tripod, that was less of a concern. An aperture of f5, and again, I would have preferred to go narrower than that to capture more depth, but I was a little bit hampered by the available light, and then ISO 500 for the same reason. The flash was set to ETTL, and it really wasn't doing a whole lot for this composition, just adding a touch of light across the top. When working with paint, you'll want to carefully move your plate around to capture different compositions, as well as swirl it to create new results. Once you've exhausted your setup, pour the mixture out into your scrap container, rinse out the bowl, and try again with new colors as many times as you like. I did a lot of experimenting from this point, so let's run through each experiment and the different results. Experiment number 1. I first poured some oil into a cup and slowly added in drops of paint before adding this to the milk. This created a murky mess with not many paintballs, so I wouldn't recommend it. Once I finished, I poured this into the scrap bowl and photographed that too because it looked interesting in itself. Experiment number 2. Then I switched to adding a layer of oil on top of the milk and then dotting in some paint drops using a pipette for each different color. For best results, you need to drop the paint into the oil only. If you add it to the milk, it will immediately spread. Experiment number 3. Now I tried fluid acrylic paint versus solid acrylic paint. And what I found was that the solid paint, when it hits the milk, creates nice swirly patterns, but less solid balls, which I suspect may be because of the water it was mixed with. Experiment number 4. Next I tried a smaller bowl, but I found it more difficult to crop out the sides. Experiment number 5. Then I tried adding just oil and paint, which created these really cool shallow results, but wasn't the look I was after. I was starting to get a bit disheartened because I really wanted results with a lot of paintballs, but I was mainly just getting colourful messes. Experiment number 6. This is where I nailed it. In this experiment, I added oil to the milk, as usual, but this time I swirled and swirled this concoction until lots of milk balls formed. I spent a fair bit of time capturing just this mixture without any paint. Then I very intentionally began to drop in my first color, carefully dropping this only into the oil and only where I wanted it, because as soon as it hits the milk, it will spread out. I photographed this before adding more colors, which I also added in very intentionally. For something different, you can now add in some dishwashing liquid, which will break apart your bubbles and stir up your mixture. You'll need to be quick to capture this process, and it can be really fun to film in slow-mo. Fantastic! So I hope this project has got your creative juices flowing, and if you capture results you're proud of, pop on over to Creative Photo Folks Facebook page to show us what you've captured. To discover even more fun photography tricks, be sure to subscribe to my channel for lots of exciting ideas. Catch you next week. Bye.